Before carrying out the hit, the killer deliberately called the police, claiming he was on his way to the station to turn himself in. But his real target was the sheriff himself. Just as he was about to pull the trigger, a woman walked up to the sheriff and gave him a light tap on the shoulder. That small gesture immediately caught the killer's attention. In his mind, anyone comfortable enough to do something that intimate was most likely the person closest to the sheriff. So Mike tossed out a line to test the waters.
Very pretty wife.
Judging by the sheriff's reaction, his instinct was spot on. Without a moment's hesitation, he squeezed the trigger and gunned down the sheriff's wife right in front of him. But it didn't end there. The next day, Mike showed up at the woman's funeral, though he just parked on the side of the road and watched from a distance, casually sketching a portrait of the sheriff. That was his signature style. He never let his targets die easy. Instead, he made them fall apart slowly, drowning in unbearable pain. Soon after, Mike took on a $3 million contract. This time, the target was a wealthy woman named Mary. Despite her fortune, she had unusual taste. She had no interest in young, pretty-faced men. What she craved were muscular, powerfully built guys. That's why she was a regular at underground fight clubs, where she liked to pick out her prey. Mike saw his opening and deliberately made his way into the ring. He found the venue's owner and told him he wanted to fight the toughest guy in the house. The owner looked him up and down, saw his slim build, and told him to get lost before he killed his business. Without a word, Mike pulled out 10 grand in cash. If the owner could get him in the ring, the money was his. It was the first time the owner had ever seen someone pay to get beaten up. He announced to the crowd, "A scrawny pretty boy at 120 pounds wants to take on a 200-pound champion. Easiest money I've ever seen." The whole place erupted in laughter. And that was exactly what Mike wanted. Through all the jeers and boos, he calmly stepped into the ring. When the fight started, Mike didn't strike back right away. He deliberately held back, even leaving openings on purpose, letting the champion pin him against the cage and land heavy shots. Once Mary's attention was completely locked on him, Mike exploded with full force, unleashing a devastating combination straight to the champion's face. Then came a spinning 360-degree hook that dropped the guy cold. But winning the fight was never the real goal. Mary was. He followed up with one more blow, snapping the champion's arm clean in half. After the fight, Mike made a show of scanning the crowd, casually letting his gaze land on Mary. That seemingly offhand glance was enough to spark her interest. She decided to take him home to her mansion. After all, no woman could resist a man who looked that clean-cut yet carried that much raw power. Once she was satisfied he wasn't a threat, Mary wasted no time leading him upstairs, ready for something more intimate, and Mike seized his chance. He used silk ribbons to tie her hands to the bed, then pulled out several syringes filled with a chemical compound. Mary assumed it was some kind of exotic foreplay and was actually looking forward to it. But the next second, Mike forced the toxin into her veins. Tetrodotoxin gradually shuts down the entire body, inducing full paralysis, while the victim remains fully conscious. Then Mike pulled a .38 caliber pistol hidden inside his shoe. He screwed on a suppressor, crept downstairs, and took out Mary's bodyguards one by one. With the obstacles cleared, he moved forward with his plan. Mike placed a glass container next to Mary, then used a tool to cut off one of her fingers and sealed it inside. He followed up with a blowtorch to cauterize the wound. Though Mary couldn't move a muscle, the searing pain still ripped through her entire body. Mike told her she had 9 more chances to give him the right answer. Every wrong one would cost her another finger. Before long, the police arrived at Mary's residence and found 10 fingers inside a container. They speculated that 9 of them were likely cut off purely for the killer's amusement, since it was nearly impossible for anyone to endure that kind of agony, let alone a woman. At the scene, police also discovered a Picasso-style sketch, which told them this killer's psychological state was deeply disturbed. He had actually taken the time to draw his victim after finishing the job. But Sheriff Cross noticed something hidden in the drawing. The killer appeared to have embedded the name of his next target within the details of the artwork. Using the initials, the police launched an investigation and eventually traced them to a company whose owner turned out to be Mike's next target. When officers attempted to enter the building to set up protection, they were stopped at the door by the security team. After hearing them out, the head of security made it clear. His men were all former special forces, and the boss's safety was none of the police's concern. Just as the guards were boasting about how bulletproof their operation was, an alarm went off from somewhere behind them. Water pressure was dropping fast. At that very moment, Mike was slipping into the building through the plumbing system.
He's already in the building, move!
The guards immediately changed their approach. They rushed the police inside, armed them, and headed straight to their boss Eric's office to warn him that things were about to get dangerous. Eric's business wasn't exactly above board, so he had zero interest in police involvement. He flat out told them to leave. What he didn't know was that the killer had already used a blowtorch to breach the water pipes. The hunt was about to begin. Mike strapped several explosives to his body, pulled a custom compact pistol from his bag, and made his way inside through a bathroom access point. After some convincing from his guards, Eric finally agreed to cooperate with the police. Sheriff Cross then led a team toward the outer perimeter to intercept Mike, leaving just 2 officers behind in the office for close protection. Before long, one of the guards spotted unusual marks on the floor, clearly left by an intruder. But before he could react, Mike took him out. In the next instant, Mike spun and dropped a second guard. The gunfire immediately put the police on alert. Eric, who had been acting tough just moments earlier, suddenly backed into a corner and hit a hidden button. As it turned out, Eric had already set up a defensive measure ahead of time, a 2-inch thick steel security door installed at the office entrance. Meanwhile, on the other side, Sheriff Cross found a body on the ground and realized the killer had likely already reached the office area. He took a shortcut and rushed to the scene. Sure enough, Mike was already at the office door, trying to force his way in, only to find the entrance completely sealed with steel plating. Just then, Cross appeared silently from behind and got the drop on him. This was the toughest opponent he had ever faced. The guy was built solid, clearly trained for years. No matter how loudly Cross barked orders, Mike just slowly raised his hands without ever truly surrendering his weapon. As Cross's patience wore thin, Mike finally set his gun down on the desk. But the instant Cross let his guard slip, Mike seized the moment and hurled the explosive device strapped to his waist. Cross fired immediately, trying to stop him, but missed. The explosion went off a second later. One officer was blown clear across the room, while Cross dove under a conference table and narrowly avoided a fatal hit. It was their first face-to-face encounter, and Cross had nearly paid for it with his life. Although Eric survived this round, no one could predict when Mike would strike again. Just as the investigation hit a wall, the forensics lab came through with a major break. They had detected tetrodotoxin in Mary's body. This toxin was virtually impossible to obtain through legal channels, which strongly suggested an underground source. Sheriff Cross already had a theory. He went to the leader of the Crip gang, whose organization was rumored to harbor a mysterious chemist, and the tetrodotoxin was very likely his handiwork. But the gang leader wasn't about to sell out one of his own, not even to a sheriff. When cooperation failed, Cross escalated. The moment a red laser dot appeared on the gang leader's forehead, it became clear he had walked straight into an ambush. A man in his position had no shortage of dirt the police could use. They could even kill him and walk away without consequences. Left with no choice, the gang leader gave up the location of the chemist. Cross and his partner moved fast, hitting the target location immediately. They didn't bother with pleasantries. They roughed the chemist up before he even had a chance to open his mouth. In their eyes, wasting words on someone like him was wasting time. Under sustained pressure, they squeezed out several key leads. The chemist admitted he had sold tetrodotoxin to Mike, but claimed he didn't know the buyer's real identity. However, the place had surveillance cameras. Police pulled the footage and quickly spotted Mike in the recording, along with his vehicle's license plate. Cross contacted the tech unit and ordered a trace on the plates. It didn't take long before they pinpointed Mike's general location. He was heading toward the federal courthouse. At first, the officers were puzzled, wondering if he was walking into a trap of his own making. But then it clicked. Today was the day Eric was scheduled to appear in court. Mike's real target was right there. But Mike had already anticipated their thinking. He deliberately abandoned his car on the side of the road as a decoy to draw police attention. Then he grabbed a guitar case and hopped on public transit. At the station platform, a few punks assumed he was some kind of street musician and started cracking jokes at his expense. Mike didn't get upset. He just smiled. But they didn't let up, continuing to taunt him even after they boarded the train.
Hey! I'm talking to you!
Mike still didn't react. He just quietly pulled out his pistol.
No, please, God, no! Where's the plan? Please,
What Mike hadn't noticed, though, was that Sheriff Cross had already abandoned the vehicle pursuit and repositioned to the courthouse entrance, deploying a massive police presence and setting up an ambush, waiting patiently for him to show. The operation involved over 100 tactical officers on the ground, plus helicopters patrolling overhead. The police were clearly going all in to stop Mike at the courthouse. But what they didn't know was that Mike had already changed his playbook. Inside the train car, he had rigged a makeshift support structure and used it to tamper with the train system, keeping the doors open at a precise moment. Right on schedule, Eric's motorcade pulled up to the courthouse entrance. At that same moment, Mike unzipped his guitar case. Inside was a rocket launcher. He quickly loaded it and mounted the weapon on the crossbar he had set up in advance. Since the train line ran directly past the front of the courthouse, the moment Eric stepped out of his vehicle, he'd be a sitting duck. An instant later, the explosion ripped through the air. The scene erupted into chaos, and Mike's mission was complete. Whistling to himself, he began his exit. On his way out, he dealt with the punk who had been running his mouth earlier. When the train reached its stop, Mike stepped off with a calm expression and vanished into the crowd.